Hello, everyone. My mother, Christy Michaels, the host of this summit, asked me to talk a little bit about the rise of the divine feminine in 2025. And I'm an astrologer, predominantly an evolutionary astrologer. Um, so the lens through which I look at, you know, most of these collective events is through the lens of astrology. So I thought I'd share a little bit with you about that rise and including um, the graphics here of the current astrological transits, just so you can get a sense. You don't have to know astrology in order to experience the happenings of being on the planet, being on planet Earth. And we're currently in the time of Pluto and Aquarius for the next 20 years, which really reflects the collective rise and change of consciousness through the process of transformation. And Aquarius is a fixed sign, it's an air sign. It is ruled by either Saturn in the traditional astrological view or Uranus in more modern astrology. And Uranus is the great liberator, the great awakener. Right now, we have two of the main asteroid goddesses also transiting through the sign of Aquarius. One is Chariklo, who was the wife of Chiron. In the myth, she was a centaur and she was a healer, a teacher, and a guide, and she relates to the properties of miracles. And the other is Ceres, who is the mother goddess, also known as Demeter. And Ceres is, the goddess of the seasons, if we think about it. She, in the story, her daughter was kidnapped by Pluto, taken down into the underworld, and she told the gods that she would freeze the earth and all its people so that no one could grow food until her daughter was returned. And so we have the seasons of winter where the earth freezes and it's very hard to grow food. It's a time of hibernation. And then we have spring and summer, where the times when her daughter returns, all the way into the fall, the harvest time. So, you know, these two archetypal goddesses both had a connection to Pluto this year, along with Venus. And a part of what that reflects for me is that there is a very core collective dynamic of both the lack of nourishment, care, and protection of the feminine, as well as our growing sense of awareness that feminine healers, teachers, leaders, and guides are equals, right? Chariklo is the equal to Chiron, not better or worse than him, or more qualified or less qualified, but equal. And when we begin to see ourselves in a different consciousness as kin, meaning that we belong to one another, as equals, meaning that all human beings were created in the image of God or in the image of the divine, and that we all have a divine purpose. That means that we can't see ourselves as separate from, someone who has differing beliefs or viewpoints or ways of living than ourselves. And this becomes increasingly more important in a world of polarization, especially where that polarization surrounds topics of faith, religion, um, politics, dogma of any kind, belief systems of any kind, ideologies of any kind, right? Whether you believe in vaccinating or not vaccinating, whether you believe in Jesus as the Lord and Savior or Mohammed as the prophet, the God, the teacher. Whether you believe in Buddha or Krishna, you know, we have to come into a space of unity with one another in mind, body, and spirit. Whether you're vegan or you eat meat, right? We can no longer find ourselves comfortable in the bounds of separation. And that will become increasingly more uncomfortable as the year goes on, especially. We have the nodes of the moon, which represent the direction of the soul and our collective soul growth in the signs of Pisces and Virgo. And this to me reflects the increasing demand on our souls to develop in the capacity of unconditional love, of the awareness of source, of the greater meaning and purpose of life that is cultivated based on faith, not in something, not in some one, but in our source, in love, in what unites and unifies us all. And what is all encompassing really is what casts out fear, what casts out pain, what casts out, separation. And this is the place where Venus is right now in Pisces. While we are following her, she's this month, beginning on February 1st, during the time of this summit, going to make a conjunction to Neptune and to the North Node. So she'll be starting a new phase of her evolutionary growth. And we could say that this summit is a kickoff of that rise of the divine feminine. But where we might be mistaken, of course, is thinking that the way that we've approached spiritual life, the way that we've approached politics, the way that we've approached community, the way that we've approached relationship, the way that we've approached work, the way that we've approached making money, the way that we've approached living across the board. Any of the ways of the past no longer work to satisfy both our deep need for connection, for union with one another, and the deep healing that is required for a society, for a people that is so deeply hurt and fractured and polarized to continue to exist in the ways that we have. This has to take root at the very foundation of our lives, in the way that we care for one another, in the way that we have our marriages, our homes, our relationships, our friendships, in the way that we work with our resources, with our time, energy, in the way that we use our voices to express ourselves emotionally, to speak out, to share our gifts with one another, right? When we see all these asteroid goddesses kind of strengthening in this quality of equality, breaking free from this quality of oppression, right? The way out of oppression is not easy. It actually means liberating ourselves from the fear of being seen. It means stepping out with our voices in ways that are deeply vulnerable and yet inherently courageous. And that these are essentially what we are created to be. We are created to be advocates for peace, for one another, for compassion, for empathy, but we often can't come to that awareness or realization without a crisis of consciousness and without a shift in our very belief systems and ideas. And for me, the path with Mary Magdalene has become increasingly clear that it's also walking a path with Yeshua, with Jesus, whom she was devoted to. And what he truly represented in the world, his primary teaching was that if you were to follow one commandment and one only, it would be to love God and to love one another. And yet, I think that is the most difficult thing for us to do, not to love God. Actually, I think it's quite easy once we've peeled away our belief systems and the conditioning we have about who or what we think God is, or what God has represented in our lives. Once we get through that layer of the onion, then we can get to this just loving our source, our creator, the one who's giving us life on earth, right? And that may be easier as we get through that conditioning, as we start to recognize ourselves as divine creations, right? And this is equivalent to the rise of the feminine because we were created by our creator for a purpose to serve alongside mankind. And that, particularly for the feminine, being vessels of the soul, being creative beings, we have a responsibility to tend that creative power. And that I think is a big part of this next 20 years of Pluto and Aquarius is that we are tending our creative actualization. If you're called to write a book, if you are called to sing songs, if you are called to paint paintings, if you are called to heal or to make medicine, whatever you are called to do with your creative life force, if you're called to give birth to children, to raise children, to tend children, right? All of these things, these are the places where we must step in most fully with our unconditional love, accepting things as they are, of course. I often hear people say, well, like, I'm not sure if I want to have children because I don't think I'd want to bring beings onto this planet in the way that it is right now. Well, then you have two responsibilities if that's your attitude towards life. You can begin sacredizing life and approaching what do you need to do to make life on earth more peaceful, loving, and harmonious for all of us. Or you can give birth to children and become a part of creating a world for them that is doing the same thing. And we need each other as much in that, both those who are giving birth to children and those who are raising children and those who are acting as activists for us. Because in reality, we were all children. We all are children. I heard somebody say the other day, God doesn't refer in the Bible, in scripture to adults ever. God only refers to humankind as little children, as created beings. And if we remember that even the things that we suffer from, the traumas that most of us are overcoming, the conditioning that most of us are overcoming is the trauma of our childhood, is the mismanagement of our childhood by our parents who were also hurt people, who also made mistakes in the ways that they were angry and victimized and hurt by society, by their parents, by culture, by whatever it was, right? By family conditioning. This is a lot of my work in astrology, is looking at the family lineages, patriarchal conditioning, our traumas, and the places in which we are healing. And I do believe that ultimately this is all a healing journey. And that what we're learning is the path of forgiveness, of healing, of unconditional love. Those are the lessons that we receive through our family, through our relationships, through our community, through our society. All these layers providing ample practice for us to wake up to the truth of who we are, which is love. And so, as we're doing this together collectively, we have to be willing to excavate the deepest parts of our wounds and our betrayals, to find the deepest calling of our light in the darkness, where we are able to recognize that we are not separate, that hurt people, that we are requiring one another in order to heal, and that is often a messy and difficult and excruciating at times process. And as we do that, we find forgiveness for ourselves and others. We find strength and power in the places where we've been weak and hurt. We find clarity in the midst of confusion. We find unity in the midst of polarization. And really, this is what the year ahead is asking us for. And as I continue to deepen into my devotion to Mary Magdalene, I recognize that it was a very important thing that Jesus, who had been said to be the Messiah, who had been sent to forgive on behalf of humanity, to give on behalf of humanity, this sacrifice of life in order for us to love one another and to be one with one another and our Creator, that it was the feminine who saw him first as he was killed, crucified, and then resurrected. So, in a sense, there is a way in which the feminine rising includes us being able to see the vision of the holiness of one another, the love of one another, the forgiveness of one another before everyone else. You can't wait for other people to get it. We can't wait for others to recognize that they are our beloved before we recognize that they are our beloved. We have to see it first. In my relationship, I have received the calling of souls long before my partner ever felt or knew their presence. And yet I had to stay true to the faith and to the trust that these callings that were in my heart were here for a reason. And he never validated that. He never recognized that in the ways that I felt it so deeply. It was often a source of conflict. It was often a way in which we fell out of love with one another. But yet, each one of these souls that has come through has redeemed and brought us deeper in this path of forgiveness and togetherness than ever before. But yet it took my commitment to the knowing of love inside of me, to the calling of God that was coming through me to bring us together as one, which ultimately did happen. And I continue to follow that path and be devoted to that, even without the answers of when it will change, of when will people see the world the way that I can see the world, right? When will people realize that we have to do this work together? Even though it's quite hard to do this work with others when they are not seeing it, not wanting it, not available for it, not desiring it. It's almost impossible. We have to remain centered in a faith and a trust in the unity of humanity, in the love that we are, in the knowing that something wants to come through us together and that it can only be created together. That's the bottom line, really. The reality is that healing on earth can only be created together. But often our counterparts are not cooperating with that healing or not wanting it or not available for it. And we will have to still trust that that's possible, that that union is our divine birthright, and it is what we are all called to, even when others are living in darkness, even when others are preferring separation or aloneness or resisting the calling of God on their lives, that we continue to have faith in love being our ultimate purpose. And that is the message of the divine feminine. And that is the message that Mary Magdalene continued to carry forth. The arrival for her into the shores of France and her time spent in the grotto was said to have been bringing the gospel and the number one teaching of Yeshua, which was that God is love and that our role is to love one another. So I'll leave you with that message in this time and the prayer that we all find that healing in our lives and in our relationship, and that we find the devotion and the stamina and the strength and the humility and the willingness that it takes in order to live that in all ways, always. Thank you so much, my friends, for joining me. If you want to be in touch, um, in any way, shape, or form, either for reading, for sessions, for more learning about astrology, you can find me at astrologywithmichelle.com and on YouTube at Astrology with Michelle. All right. Thanks so much. Bye for now.